Kira, for your wonderful introduction. As you noticed that I'm the only Korean speaker among the invited speakers, which means I'm a non-native speaker, which gives me some pressure to talk in a big conference like this. So unless the audience is giving me supporting smiles or some reactions, I get very nervous and I go blank. So I purposefully put some of my close friends in this room so that in case I go blank, they can talk something for me. Okay, today I'm so honored to be here at KOTESOL Conference. It's my first experience. I've heard about it, but it's the first time to participate. And coming to this conference surprised me because of the audience. I see more non-native speakers than Koreans. Usually when I go to Korean conferences, I see more Koreans. But here at KOTESOL Conference, I see more smiles on the audience, and I heard more laughters along the hallway that made me a little bit relaxed. So if I make any mistakes, please be generous. Okay, today I'd like to share some of the idea that I think are very important for us Koreans to make our English education better. My talk will include 3 parts. First, I'd like to talk about what we face now in current English education in Korea. And then I move on to identify some of the missing elements in our education now. And then I will move on what we have to do for the future. What do we face now? Let me begin with the true or false question. Give me your answer. I need your supporting smile and response. Korean learners are good at communicating in English. True or false? False. Let's see. We like to see some result. This is the result 2009 by British Council, the result of IELT tests. Korean people invest a lot of money and time to learn English. Personally, and at the governmental level, we also pour a lot of investment in improving public English education. And the result is shown from British Council. This is the result of English language test that includes reading, listening, speaking, and writing. Can you guess the rank of Koreans?
13.
You are so smart. See, 19th. That's very disappointing, especially to figure out we are under Japan. We are under China. We spend more money, but Koreans are not getting that good level. See, we are below all these other Asian countries. That really deeply hurts us. Now, then, what is the reason? Can you guess?
Koreans taking tests a lot.
Yes, we have a lot of tests. And let's see why. I'd like to identify. First, we are very inefficient in our education because we have different goals, conflicting goals. We study English to get good scores at school level, but at the same time, we try to learn English to communicate. These conflicting goals are giving us no way to go. And also there are discrepancy in our practices. Because we have conflicting goals, sometimes we just study instead of engage in meaningful practice. And there is also discrepancy in tests, as you mentioned. There, we have achievement tests. When we are giving achievement tests at school level, we try to trick students. We are not making English tests to assess their communication ability. We try to trick them. We try to rank them. At the same time, students, if they go to college, they have to study hard to get some score in one of those proficiency tests, such as TOEFL or the IELT. That includes speaking and writing, which is the productive skills that we really don't do at school levels. So let's take a look at some of the test examples to see the destiny of Korean learners. At school level, this is the test item for grade 6 at elementary school. If you see it clearly, it gives you a schedule, weekly schedule, and they ask you how often do you exercise, and they want to see if a learner can produce a sentence using frequency adverb. See, this is the girl who's taking that test. She's choosing a stick, and she would read the sentence that she chose, and then she will reply with her own answer. So it's a truly communicative test. This girl, the very next year, she goes to middle school. And in the middle school, she begins to have this problem. What are the facts? Is this a language test or knowledge test? We don't know. We never know. The whole purpose of doing this is to rank them. Another one, grammar test. I'm from America. What would be the answer? The girl poorly selected, I came from America. Is it right or wrong? Bill, is it right or wrong? Okay, right? But she got it wrong because the teacher's intention was to see if she's recognizing the present tense right here. So the correct answer is I come from America. Isn't it so sad? So her rank got below than other classmates. And if she goes to high school, the typical test would be like this, filling in the blanks or giving some sentence and ask them to put them into the right place. So hard even for us, right? So the loop becomes like this. Do you still remember the happy girl? So as a mother of 2 kids, it's so painful to see moving from this happy face. She's not my girl, of course. Moving from this stage to this stage. They stay in this stage forever, from middle school until they graduate high school or until they get into college. When they get into college, their lives are up to their own. So they have good time. But that's not their life. They have to look for employment. And for the employment, surprisingly, they don't request those ranks by the school. They look for, this is from one of my study, 2009. I investigated the domestic companies and global companies, what kind of criteria they seek for English evidence. And domestic companies, for example, if students get a job in one of the domestic companies, such as Kookmin Bank, they never speak English for their work. Even though they don't use English at all for their work, they require official scores, speaking scores, and they also administer group interview or one-on-one interviews. Isn't that amazing? That adds extra stress for college students to be able to communicate in English and get good proficiency scores. So, Korean learners are having dual life. What? Study English for tests and study English to be able to communicate. So sad. So, how can we improve our current English education system in Korea? So simple. We need to avoid having conflicting goals and try to match the goals with the practice, and we match the assessment along with them. Now, that was up until May. In May this year, I was invited as an evaluator for the final debate competition. I was sitting there to observe those participants, who's good, who's going to get the gold medal or silver medal or bronze medal. So I was beginning to observe them, but they gave me the scoring criteria. I didn't really pay attention to it and begin to observe the competition. And I just begin to feel some of those participants in the final round of debate competition, Korean speakers were so aggressive. Their tone sounds like almost angry tone to me. Are they fighting? So, does debate mean fighting or debate means debate? So, I was beginning to evaluate them according to another criteria that I made up myself. Observing them if they are listening carefully toward their opponents, or if they are reacting to some of the comments of their opponents, and if when they're making their points, if their tone is calm down, not an angry tone. And at the end of that evaluation, all these evaluators were gathered together to select the final gold medal, bronze medal, etc. And the one that I valued the most didn't get the prize. I was so surprised. Other evaluators asked me, why did you give so many points to this particular participant? I said, this participant was good at making points without having that angry tone with the excessive volume or really fast talk. And also, this participant was able to listen carefully what other parties are saying and try to include those comments from the opponents. But anyway, other evaluators, mostly Koreans, told me, you didn't use your scoring guide carefully. And I looked at the scoring guide, and it's all about accuracy and fluency, grammar, and vocabulary. There was no communication there. So when I came home, I began to look at some of the documents, Korean curriculum, textbook, or scoring guide, and I couldn't find the communication part. So that gave me this question. Let me give you that question to you. Is it true or false? People who's able to speak English fluently, are they necessarily good communicator in English? Dear Korean participants, audience here, people who's able to speak Korean fluently. We grew up with Korean language. Everybody speaks Korean fluently. Are we necessarily good communicator in Korean? Not necessarily. So that leads us to think that language proficiency and communication cannot be identical. Maybe there is some difference. Okay, let me give you another question. I'm only responsible for what I say, not for what they understand. Is it true? In the past, a long time ago, about 30 years ago, when we are reading a book, we were trying to figure out what the author means by some phrase. But what about in post-modern era? We are beginning to interpret the meaning ourselves. We give that power to the reader. Reader should be able to come up with their own meaning depending on their personal lives. So, now give me your answer. Communication is what they understand, not what you mean. Can it be true? It can be true. So now we should include audience, communication and audience in our language teaching, I suggest. Now let's look at some of the signs that I collected. You know, we are taking our cell phone wherever, so whenever I see the signs that can explain my point, then I take pictures. Now, I'm going to show you some of the signs that you would see most frequently in your life. Wherever you go, in a big amusement park or a big conference like this, you will try to look for this sign. What would that be? Usually information booths will get a lot of, it's one of the most frequently asked questions. What would that be? Where is the restroom? So now you go to Spain, you look at this sign, would you like to go in or not? Gentlemen, are you going in or not? You are not so sure because information given by this sign is not enough unless we see the other part. If we compare these two closely, then we know which one is ladies' room and which one is gentleman's room. What about this?
Ladies' room.
Ladies' room, so easy for us. But I met one guy from Scotland. He looked at the bow tie and men's skirt. So he couldn't identify unless he saw the other sign. Let's look at the other sign in one of the conference. The length of the jacket, the length of skirt. It's confusing at first. You have to look closely, especially because it has a welcome sign underneath it. So confusing. If we add the men and women to that, easier. If we remove the welcome sign, easier. So when we are providing information in our communication, it should be enough, but it shouldn't be excessive. What about this? Easy? If you know English, men and women can be easy. But to some people, contrasting these two, confusing. Why? Upside down image. It's sometimes creating confusion. What about this? One lady told me I was not very good at biology. I don't know which side it is. Even with contrast, some people will never guess. What about this? Does it provide good information here?
No.
It tries to provide some sort of color, gentleman, and the shape. So it tries to provide more information. So if you are dealing with unknown audience, it's always better to provide more clue. I found this in one of the cafeteria in front of Jihyeon University. Serendipity. And then at KOTESOL yesterday, I found this sign. They even include the Korean letter there. So smart. Now, so far we looked at the sign in terms of information. Now let's look at some of the signs if it reflects audience viewpoint. You found this sign. You gladly turn around the corner, and what's gonna happen is this. The door is open, covering the sign. What's gonna happen? You have to go behind the door to figure out. Is it audience-centered? No. What about this? Beautifully designed door in Spain, but you are so confused. Beautiful. And I was in one of the elevator. I wished if the light is yellow or orange or some other color instead of white, because I was trying to make sure the button, if I press the right button. Do you know which floor I'm going to? B3. But if you have poor vision, so hard. And this is one of the signs that I see in the parking lot. As I walk, I found this sign so easily. But when I get into my car, driving, all these signs disappeared. Why? Because it was below the bar of the ceilings. It's not audience-centered. Look at this sign in Australia. It's a broken image as I walk by, but while I was driving, it was all connected, beautiful letters. This is what we can call audience-centered. This is the picture that I took at Hong Kong airport. It shows, look left. When we are crossing the street, we know where to look. But in a foreign country, you don't know where to look. I used to have a neighbor, American neighbor, below my apartment. On the very first day, I took her out for a restaurant. We were having Korean-style shabu-shabu. We had a clear soup and some other food. And the question that I was asked first was that she asked me, Jihyeon, should I use a spoon or chopstick to eat that soup? So I was wondering, Who's gonna eat soup with chopstick? See, if you are in a foreign country, if you are surrounded by unknown faces, you become an idiot. Right? That happens. So when I go to a foreign country, when I'm surrounded by a completely new environment, then I become an idiot. I need to know from A to Z, verbally communicated to me. So audience-centered view, to sum up, will be what? Reflecting audience viewpoint, and it should be easy to process. So for the future, if we want to make our communication audience-centered, what do we have to do? We have to consider our audience. Then we have to figure out who's our audience. Who are we communicating with, especially in English? We use English as a medium of our communication. In the past, we learned English to communicate with inner circle countries such as United States, English-speaking countries such as United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Britain, etc. But these days, we learn to communicate English with people in outer circle countries such as Singapore or Philippines, where people use English as an official language. In addition to that, with Japanese or with Chinese, we don't communicate necessarily in Chinese or Japanese. We communicate with them in English. So, which means we are having diverse audience. Now, are we having difficulty communicating with people of different culture? Now, I have a lot of native colleagues here and some Korean colleagues here. I often wonder in a faculty lounge at Ewha or faculty dining room, I don't see many scenes where I see Korean faculty and native speaker colleagues together sitting there eating and having some small talks. I don't see that quite often. I always wonder why. And sometimes if I ask, I'm going to have lunch with Mark, who is my Canadian colleague, to my Korean colleagues. And then they say, oh, I want to have my meal comfortably. What does that mean? Native speakers are eating them? No. What's going to happen? We don't feel comfortable in our communication using the medium of English. Why? We are sharing the same language. All English teachers. Korean faculty members are usually obtained their advanced degrees in English-speaking countries. So their English proficiency level is okay. Yet, they still feel uncomfortable sitting around the table and having small chats with the native speaker colleagues. Native speaker colleagues, do you have really close Korean colleagues that you share genuine communication? Or do you communicate minimally for work? Even we work together for good education in college, we talk only minimally toward each other. Why? We have some difficulty. First, we have feelings, of discomfort. We don't know why we are so uncomfortable, but we are not so sure if we made our party understood what I meant, and if we are not sure if I understood their thought. Okay, so we have that feeling of uncomfortableness. And also, there is a perceptual difference. Let me ask you to close your eyes and in front of your paper, try to draw a vase, flower vase. Can you draw? Okay, you can open your eyes to grab a pen and then close back and then draw a vase. Did you draw a vase? Can I see it? Okay, I do have some time. Let's see. You draw one. Okay. Okay. Perfect. One, it's a round one. The other one is like this, thinner one. Why? Even we are in the same room, we attend to different things at any given moment. That perceptual difference can make some difference. It's not moving? Okay. Okay. Suddenly, it's not moving. Okay. Maybe this 3M product doesn't like me to move around. Okay, so we attend to different things at any given moment. And our languages are all different. So we have a difference in familiarity with syntax, phonology, morphology, and pragmatics. And also there are cultural differences. Have you heard of, there are a lot of theories to contrast different culture. One of the typical one is comparing low context culture and high context culture. Low context culture people will depend less on context. And high context culture people will depend more on context. Which means it is reflected in the language too. Let me give you the definition first. High context culture people, for them, most of the information in a given message lies in the context. So much of the meaning is understood by the members of the same group. And so they need not to directly communicate. And people of low context culture, most of the information is in a given message. So explicit communication is always needed among the members. And this kind of cultural contrast can be reflected in our language as well. In English that we all know, if you fall in love with someone, what do you say? I love you. Did I make you an idiot? No. I love you. We need I, subject, and we need love, verb, and we need you, object. What about in Korean? Korean? Yes. Korean people usually don't say I or you. We simply say verb. 사랑해요. What does that mean? Under the given context, if there is two of you, we understand who's I and who's you, so we don't say it. Isn't that amazing? Now let's consider the difference of, when we compare low context culture and high context culture, it's a continuum. We cannot say this country belongs to low context culture, this country belongs to high context culture. That's an old concept. These days, this contrast belongs to even intra-cultural communication. See, walking on the grass is forbidden. Maybe people in Germany will say that. The same idea, American people will say, please do not walk on the grass. And French people, those who respect their environment, will avoid walking on the grass. Korean people, the grass gets hurt by human walks. Japanese people, please let us continue to have the beauty of the grass. So even with the same idea, there are differences. And another difficulty of communicating with people of different culture is that because of that cultural difference, our communication style is different. On the one hand, people have explicit communication, and the other hand, people have implicit communication. How many of native speaker teachers or colleagues are having difficulty because a Korean faculty member didn't tell you something and say they said it, right? Yes, many of you experience that. How many Korean colleagues think it's so not easy to communicate with a non-native speaker faculty? I felt like I told him, but he never got it. Why? Because of the difference in communication style. On the one hand, people tend to have direct communication. On the other hand, people would have indirect communication. So these are the major difficulties that we face when we are dealing with people of different culture. Now, considering global audience, which is what will make us move toward the less traveled, I was fascinated by the theme of this conference. So I accepted the invitation right away because I thought I would come up with some new idea. We have to accommodate global audience. How? Where do we get those information? Are there people researching on this topic? Of course. There are some people who's focusing on world English, and some people like us on English education, and some people focus on intercultural communication. But we don't share much. We have different academic associations, and we haven't tried really hard to integrate all these elements together. If we integrate these, we can figure out our English communication for global audience. So, how can we successfully communicate in English with people of different culture? We need to have some sort of principle. I just contrasted the difference. How are we going to make our communication? Is it important for what speaker says only, or is it also important what they understand important? So we need to have a communication. In order to make our communication successful, both parties should cooperate. So I made up some cooperating principles based on the information that I gave you already. In order to reduce the feelings of discomfort, uncertainty, and doubts, what do you have to do? Simply observe, practice, practice, practice. You have to be aware of those uneasy feelings. It's not because they don't like you. It's not because they don't want to intend to have a good friendship with you. So you have to observe the difference and look for discomforting parts in your communication with the people of different culture. And you need to know how to adjust your communication. In order to deal with the difference in perception, it's always better to provide more clue. If there is someone who can understand the message without having much clue, they can understand if you provide more clue. So I used this sign because more clue is easier to process. So as we saw, provide more clue for everybody. At least they can get one part of it. And you also have to consider the difference in their mother tongues in terms of syntax, phonology, morphology, and pragmatics. Consider the difference in syntax. Shorter one is usually easier to process. Look at this example. Our goals include making a determination about that in the near future. Sounds like a good speaker. But this one is much easier. Now, consider the difference in phonology. If you provide more contrast, it's easier. Try to avoid using similar sounds. Try to use distinguishable sounds. I can't be there. I cannot be there. Which one is more distinguishable? Cannot be. Yes, be. Consider the difference in phonology. With written words for adult learners or without written words? With written words. Look at this. I'm Jihyeon. Native colleagues, can you recognize my name easily if you just hear it? Because of the combination of sound is different in different language, sometimes it doesn't stay with you. If you provide a spelling and repeat it, they can easily recognize the name. And consider the difference in morphology. The similar one is easier to recognize. Look at this. Two English speakers, it's so obvious, so easy to differentiate. But what about this? If you see Korean letters, looks like completely upside down, right? Confusing. So it's better to give the words because then we can attend to the length as well. And consider difference in pragmatics. More commonly used expression is probably easier to process. Look at this. How are you? Typical greeting sentence that we learn, all Korean learners learn from the textbook. So, how are you? Fine, thank you. And you? That's typical expressions. So, one Korean learner went to the States and got a traffic accident. And the policeman approached him and asked him, how are you? And he said, fine, thank you. And you? Because that's the only expression that he could remember. Now, my Canadian colleague always say, hi, how are you? Hello, to all these Korean faculty members. But one day, he just thought he would switch to different expression because he thought he was using so many same expressions. So he said, what's up? What's new? Korean professors are sweating, searching for words and trying to get the answer. Try to use familiar expressions. It's easier. So to sum up, consider the difference in mother tongue. Simpler one is easier to process. And you can adjust. If your interlocutor can take more, then you can adjust to give them more. And consider the culture of your audience. If you are able to understand high context cultural communication, like things are understood from the context, then it's okay. You can deal with more low context cultural communication where people verbalize, right? So explain more, make it explicit, make it direct. I have always wanted to visit that giant waterfall nearby, but it's not fun going there alone. How about going there together? Silence. Silence. And this lady is giving, sure. Well, I just bought my baby a pair of brand new shoes. Now, can you guess? What's agreed? Going there or not going there? No. From the high context culture, we can sense instantly we're not going there. But the one who suggested this from low context culture will never know whether he's able to go or not. Vary your communication. Usually it's safer to verbalize. Clean that room first. Clean that room first. Sweep the floor, dust the desk, and clean the window. Which one is easier for you? Because cleaning can mean different things. A, if you just say A to the person, you will get only clean floor. But if you say B, you get everything cleaned. So make it explicit and vary your communication. Direct communication is usually easier. Get this? So hot in here. What does it mean? Would you mind opening the window? Poor Korean learners have hard time to reply to this expression, would you mind? Because we usually don't mind. Could you please open the window? So easy. So direct expression is usually easier. In addition, there are many things that we should consider in order to communicate with people from different culture. For example, turn takings, frequency, like am I going to talk again and again and again, and for how long? And we usually don't know. Like when I have a conversation with American colleagues or native speaking colleagues, I don't know when to jump in because the Koreans are so used to given a chance to talk. So usually we get the turn-taking signal. Then we jump in. We cannot really jump in during the conversation. So you need to know, consider when to jump in and when to yield the turn to others. And also silence is a good part of communication. Someone's silence. Is she communicating or not? She's communicating. Even with the silence, people still communicate. Eye contact and face. Face is important. Does it mean this face? No. I mean face, it's very important in Asian culture and even in any English-speaking countries' culture. What it means is that people want to keep good image toward others. That good image that one wants to keep, that's the face. So for example, dear native speaker colleagues, don't talk to your Korean colleagues in front of students. Why? Because it can ruin their face. Because they are English professors, they want to be like a perfect English speaker. They don't want to sometimes speak in front of their students. So that can happen. So there are a lot that we can consider. So in order to educate our students to be good communicator in English, we need to teach for communication, not to teach only the language, considering audience-centered approach. Okay, these are some references for you. Okay, I think that's it. If you want this slide, you can email me, then I can send you the slides. Thank you very much.